Hi, everyone. We're so excited that you're here with us at the reunion, and I am very excited that you are part of this special breakout session, which I think is personally going to be the best breakout session. I am here with 6 of my favorite people, and for the sake of this session, we're calling them hope-filled kids. Obviously, none of them are really kids anymore. The youngest of our group is 18 now, so they're all officially young adults. But when I met them all, they were definitely kids, and they were all served by Inheritance of Hope. In fact, I feel like these 6 people represent they represent best what Inheritance of Hope is all about. When Kristen Milligan had this idea, she really wanted to pour into her 3 kids who are joining us on this breakout session. She wanted to help make sure that they had lasting memories. She wanted to make sure that they had a community that was strong around them, and other people that understood, people that could pour into their lives and help them in all the areas. And she wanted to make sure that they had a lot of tools to help them navigate her illness, and if she were to die, that as well. So what was beautiful is then from there, her and Derek, her husband, realized there were lots of other kids, just like their kids. And so we have 3 other kids, not really kids, but that also have walked a similar journey. And all of these beautiful young adults, they are hope-filled. And I'm excited that you get a chance to hear their stories and some of their perspective. I hope that this is a tremendous gift to you, and I think it will be. In fact, I know it will be. So I'm just excited that I get to help them share a little bit more about their story and give this gift to you. So before I let them introduce themselves and we start with some questions, I want to make sure everyone knows that although we cannot see you or hear you, we definitely want you to be a part of this. So please take advantage of the chat bar. If you click on the chat and then you make sure you post, you can either chat just with the panelists, which are these beautiful 6 people, or you can chat with the panelists and everyone. And I love that because I think that will allow you to get to know who else is on this webinar with us. So please click on the chat, type whatever you want. These folks that are sharing today are going to be able to see all of your comments and questions. So if you want to say anything specifically to any of them, you can type that in the chat. If you have any specific questions, they're not going to be able to answer them right away, but we will be able to share that with them, and we can get back to you if you have any specific questions. We also will have one of our IoH staff members that is moderating that chat room, the chat bar. So if you have any immediate questions, feel free, chat away, and encourage these young adults, and also let us know what you're thinking and how you're feeling about what they're sharing. So now, without further ado, I'm excited for them to be able to introduce themselves. So we'll just go around here on the screen, and you guys can share your name and how old you are now, and maybe the age when your parent was diagnosed, and the age when your parent passed away, and then your current status. Are you in school? What are you doing? We'll go ahead and kick it off with Josh Bloss. Go ahead, Josh. You're on mute. Don't forget.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Bloss, and I'm 22 years old now. I was 16, I believe, when my mom was diagnosed. I was a junior in high school. It was the start of my junior year. And I was served on the 2016 November Legacy Retreat in New York City. And I'm currently a senior at the University of Toledo.
Awesome. All right. How about Haley Black?
Hi, everyone. My name's Haley. I am currently 21 years old. My mom was diagnosed when I was 14, and she passed away when I was 16. We went on a legacy retreat in August of 2014, so I was 15 at that time. And then I am currently a senior at the University of Illinois.
Okay, Spencer Reed.
My name's Spencer. I am 25 and I was served in 2015. Originally, my mom was initially diagnosed and went through treatment and was cancer-free and then re-diagnosed. So the first diagnosis I was 15 and then re-diagnosis I was 18, 19. And I live in Atlanta now and work for Inheritance of Hope.
Awesome. All right, now we have the Milligan kids. Who would like to start us off? How about we'll start with the oldest, Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I am currently 21 years old. I was 4 when my mom was diagnosed and was 13 when she died, and I am now a senior at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
Luke.
My name is Luke Milligan. I am 19 now. My mom was diagnosed when I was 2. She passed away when I was 11, and I am currently a junior at UNC Charlotte.
And Becca.
My name is Rebecca. I was, I think, 8 months old when my mom was diagnosed. I'm now 18, and I was 10 when she passed away. And I'm now a senior in high school.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here and for doing this. And I'm just going to jump in with some questions, and I'd love to hear from some of you when you want to respond. So the first question I have for you is, what was the hardest thing that you experienced during your parents' illness or during their death? And we'll go ahead and start with, how about Josh?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I didn't mention that my mom passed away when I was 18 years old. So I just turned 18 just a couple months after I turned 18. So I was an adult by the state standard, which was really hard when they were passing away. But we'll go back to when she was sick. Initially, it was really hard. We don't have a ton of extended family. And so when my mom was given the diagnosis that she was only going to live 3 months, my little brother and I were pretty much at a loss, which was really, really hard. But she ended up living 2.5 years. She was a fighter. She was stubborn. And I think that's really what got her through all of that chemo and radiation. But I think the last 2 months, which is when our legacy retreat fell in, was the hardest part of her illness. As a 17, 18-year-old, I was really shielded a lot from the things that my mom was going through. And on October 29th, 2016, when I first brought my mom to the hospital, I learned from there, from October 29th to December 14th, when she passed away, I learned more about her illness, about what she was going through, in that short amount of time that I did the 2.5 years prior to her diagnosis and all that she went through. And I think that I'll get into some of the things that I would suggest for a parent later. But that was really hard for me to not know exactly what my mom was going through, and then for it to all kind of hit me at the same time, to see the way her sickness was affecting her physically, emotionally. There was a time where she forgot my name, and that was really, really hard. And there was just a lot of things in the hospital that were really hard. And then after she passed away, the hardest part for me was remembering my mom in a way that was joyful, to remember the joyful moments and not the moments that I was sitting in the hospital with her when she was really, really sick. And then the other thing that was really hard after she passed away was she didn't really take responsibility for the things that she needed to before she passed away, which, again, I'll talk about this more later, but she didn't have a will written. She chose to not make a legacy retreat video, and so we weren't given one of those when she passed away. And there's just a lot of things that she kind of left for me and my siblings to figure out, which was really, really hard. And it made it even harder to process and to mourn that death. So, yeah, I think there's a whole lot of hard things, and I know you guys know that. Everyone in this chat knows that, and everyone listening knows that. But those are just some specifics that I experienced.
Thanks for sharing, Josh. Haley, you want to add on to that at all?
Yeah, I'd say for me, one of the hardest things that I experienced through both my mom's diagnosis and her death was like the unknown. I had a lot of questions like, what's going to happen to my family when she passes away? Is my mom going to make it to my first prom, my graduation, my college move-in day? Is it going to become lonely because we had so many people in and out of our house, which we were very fortunate that we had a lot of help. I have a sister who has some disabilities and things, and that was another worry that I had, like, is, I'm just going to have my dad after my mom passes away. Am I going to have to do anything to help take care of my sister? What happens when, something happens to my dad? And I had a lot of anxiety and stress about that during my mom's illness. And I didn't really talk about it with anybody, so it kind of just sat with me. And so that's just kind of one of the things that I really had to deal with, not only through her experience, like through her illness, but, after her death, and realizing that I know, like, I then knew the answers to those unknown questions, but no, she didn't make it to my graduation, and no, she didn't get to see me go through college, which was something really hard to accept. But, you go through each day and you have other people that you can lean on, and friends and family. And so I think that's something that's really important to consider when you're thinking about all the hard things that you're experiencing right now.
So good. Thanks, Haley. Luke, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things Josh and Haley were mentioning applied to my situation as well. One thing almost sort of outside my family that I had trouble dealing with, and it was very difficult for me, was since I was such a small, this was basically something I was dealing with for a little over like the first decade of my life. So, hanging out with the friends that I had at that age, they kind of, they weren't dealing with these sort of issues and stuff in my hometown. So it was kind of strange. I was confused why. I at first I thought this was a situation that everybody was having, and everybody had something going on like this, and to sort of learn growing up that it wasn't like that, and that they didn't have these things to deal with, sort of frustrated me. And it almost frustrated me more sometimes, like how they seemed to take it for granted, which I feel like is something anybody would do in that situation. I take all kinds of things for granted myself, but it was hard for me to see my peers and stuff. It felt like they had it better. They didn't have to deal with these kinds of things. And so that was something that I struggled with a lot, sort of outside the family. And then again, I had a lot of those similar problems that Josh and Haley were having just inside the family.
While you're talking, Luke, did anything surprise you about the whole experience besides what you shared already?
Yeah, so that was surprising me as I grew up. I think throughout the whole process, the most surprising thing of it all was closer to as she was. So when she was passing away, it was they told her, like Josh mentioned, that she had 6 months to live when I was 2, and if that had been the case, then I likely wouldn't have any memories or remember her at all. So I was used to all these very grim outlooks on how much time she had left, or and I didn't really understand any of the medical things going on, and still don't, frankly. So I kind of was used to hearing how bad the news was, and then sort of just expected it to be all right, because that's how it had been for such a long time. So when she passed away, it was surprising that I mean, it sort of felt like she was invincible after all the things I was hearing. Like, they were like, oh, there's no way she can make it through this surgery, this treatment. There's like nothing else we can do. And then she'd make it through it anyway. So it was surprising that, I mean, ultimately it took her. And I was also surprised after she passed away. I sort of always had these like almost nightmares of like how it would be like the end of the world when she passed away and everything. And I mean, it wasn't good by any stretch of the imagination, but it was almost, there was a weight that was sort of lifted off of our shoulders, which wasn't one that we wanted to be lifted off of our shoulders. But I was surprised at when she passed away how it was easier than my brain had imagined it would be, since I thought that I just imagined it to be like were like beyond imagination how terrible I thought. And it wasn't good, but there were so many people that were there for me. I have a lot of family, a lot of friends through Inheritance of Hope and other places that made the experience sort of soften the blow. And I think what going forward was surprising was how like the first 3 months or so are almost the easiest. The first 3 months after she passed away were almost the easiest for me because of all the people who were like trying to be aware of like everyone in my life was like giving me a shoulder to cry on, somewhere to go. And sort of as time goes forward, you're sort of just expected to move past that, and you don't. So for me, I think it was surprising how much more difficult the ensuing time after the first 3 months was, when I sort of always imagined that like that first day and then the weeks thereafter would be the worst.
Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, I could add on to that about what surprised me. The first thing that occurs to me in that question would probably be how much of an impact the illness had on our whole family. And what's really interesting about it, I think, is I don't know that I knew as much. Obviously now, I mean, always looking back, you're able to tell, but it took me a while to realize how much the illness sort of tore at the fabric of our family and damaged I think all of our relationships with each other. So, and my mom was the one who's sick, so her included in that, but each one of us with each other, I think, was something that, and again, and that's, you know, a big part of why you have to look at these diseases, I think, as something that affects families holistically, because that was my experience, was that it's not something that one family member is dealing with and everybody else is supporting them. It's something that everybody is dealing with and is really impacted by, and the relationships within that are impacted by. So again, I don't know that, and I've heard that from other families and kids too. So I don't know that that's everybody's experience for sure, but I think that that's, in my experience, was something that surprised me and doesn't anymore when I do hear it, and is a mentality I think is good to have towards these situations, is that you really are looking at something that can almost destroy your family entirely from the get-go if you don't talk about it, of course.
Thanks, guys. All right, I have a question. Maybe this for the three girls. You guys can answer this one. What emotion, we'll start with Becca. What emotion for you has lingered the longest?
I would say for me, the emotion that has lingered the longest is regret. I was only barely 10 when my mom died. And I didn't spend a lot of time with her in the last few months before her death, because she was really sick at that point. She wasn't really getting out of bed very much, and that scared me. But I really wish that I had made the most out of the time that she had left. I think, like Luke said earlier, that I didn't actually think she was going to die because I thought she was invincible. So I think I was kind of waiting for that phase to pass, and then it didn't, and then I kind of lost my opportunity.
Ashley.
Yeah, I think that I actually have had two lingering experiences, and they are very opposite. The two are probably joy and then also deep sorrow and grief. And it's interesting because you experience those in different stages and different times. So I'm not experiencing both at the same time. So it just kind of depends on like circumstantially what's going on around me. Sometimes I remember her with a lot of joy and hope for my future, and like, oh, thinking about my future as a mom, she did so much right and so much well, and I'm so excited to continue to emulate her and carry on her legacy in that way. And then sometimes it's just, I had this person in my life who was so caring and supportive of me, and I don't have that anymore, and that is deeply painful in a lot of really complex ways. I think I'm still learning how to express myself emotionally, because I mean, that's what happens with children whose parents die from this. They often don't even understand themselves and their own emotions super well. So I'm sort of learning how to experience grief as I learn how to experience emotion, as I learn kind of who I am. Like, for example, my mom died in October. So this is the 8th October that's passed since she died. And I'm only this month realizing that every October is hard for me. And every October I kind of re-experience some of that pain, because I didn't process the grief very well when I was 13. So I'm still kind of working through a lot of that. But I also am not putting a cap on the amount of time that I'm allowed to grieve. I'm not saying like, if I had experienced this when I was older, 8 years would have been enough time to heal. I'm just saying there was a lot I didn't express very well when I was that age. But by no means am I saying that like 15 years from now, I hope the Octobers will be easy or whatever. Like, grieving is a very expressive and very healthy emotion to feel. There's times where you can dip into too much of it, and that's why I think the joy is important to remember too. But yeah.
That's good. Haley, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with all of those emotions. I definitely feel like I had all of them when my mom passed away. It was a lot of them was, it was all bottled up, and I didn't know how to express my feelings. But I think, like Rebecca, one of the ones that I think lingered the most was regret, kind of in a different way though. I mean, there were a lot of times where I regretted not spending more time with my mom, and I was 16, I was in high school, so I wanted to spend time with my friends and things like that. And I definitely wish that I would have maybe taken a little bit more of a step back from that and spent a little bit more time with my mom. But I think one of the biggest things I regretted was not asking her those questions that I have now, those questions that only she can answer, that are personalized for her. And a lot of the things that I regret now, we're not asking the hard questions that I have. And that's also something that's really hard when you're in high school, because you don't have those hard questions yet, So I think that, even though I regret a lot of these things, I try and focus on the fact that, it's okay that I didn't do quite all those things because I was so young. You have to think about how old you are, and, you do get as much time with your parent as you can. And now it's just really important to, notice the maybe not mistakes that you made, but I guess you could say it that way, and focus on spending time with people in your life right now and making memories with them, because the memories are kind of what keep that person alive.
Thank you guys so much. I know this isn't easy, and you guys are doing such a nice job. I'm kind of going to go a little bit out of order. We had some questions prepared, everyone. And I just want to make sure we end with all of the hope, because that's what this is about. And I know we've started out really heavy and it's been really hard. But to make sure we end with a lot of the hope, I actually am going to skip you guys so you can be prepared here. I'm going to give Rebecca and Spencer both a chance to share a little bit about what you maybe wish your surviving parent did differently after your loss, and also what they've done really well since your loss. So I don't know who wants to start, but maybe one of you could get those.
I can start.
Okay, Becca.
Most of you guys know my dad as the CEO of Inheritance of Hope, so you can imagine that he was pretty well put together. And I think because of that, he felt like a huge responsibility, as I would imagine most parents do in the situation, to make sure that he was doing everything that he could. And I don't think that he really ever took breaks. So I wish that he had taken more time off for himself. Because I mean, his daily tasks exhausted him such that, you know, he just had a sabbatical, and it took 3 months for him to feel rested at all. And I think it's partly related to how much he took on. But I think that aside from that, he did pretty much everything else really well. He was really good at, you know, staying on top of work and making everyone in Inheritance of Hope feel loved, but not making me or my siblings feel like we weren't a priority. And he made talking about my mom after her death normal and joyful. Even like we had occasions we would celebrate on her birthday even though she wasn't here with us, and I think that was really special and really cool of him to initiate.
And then for me, I guess what my dad could have done differently, and I mean, which is an interesting question to answer, because who knows, really? Who knows how this would have affected things differently? And, you know, trying to say that things being done differently would have made a big difference is hard to say. But I maybe similar to what Rebecca is saying, I think that, of course, my dad carried most of the burden out of all of us in terms of being the caregiver. And I think, if anything, maybe at times he could have been more honest with us about things like being intentional and the importance of that and the reality of our situation. I mean, I have two sisters and I'm in the middle, but so we weren't super young, but still definitely emotionally young and still teenagers. So I think, that said, there's things that he could have told us that maybe would have reoriented some of our thinking on even just day-to-day choices and the way we supported our mom day-to-day and helped with things. That said, I don't necessarily think that he didn't do those things, but I think he could have gone a step further even with it. As far as what he did and has done well, I mean, I think he did everything when my mom was sick and alive that he could have done. But since then, I think he has given us the right direction in terms of his own happiness. So, you know, he lost his partner in life, which I think is as bad as it can get for almost anyone, because that's the person that he chose to spend his whole life with. And when you do that, you envision that being for a long, long time and right up into old age with grandkids and everything. And he lost that. And the person that, you know, he would travel with or retire with, or, you know, the person that would be his best friend through the rest of his life is gone. So that is something that I think, despite of all that, he's shown to me his own resiliency and his own ways of discovering all new things and a whole new life for himself and happiness for himself. Stuff that he probably never imagined he would have to deal with, things that he probably never thought he would have to figure out. And he's faced those challenges head on. And I think I see him as somebody who's very happy, who still deals with the reality of having lost his partner in life, but is very happy and makes decisions on a daily basis, does things for himself, and tries to be a happy person with a good outlook. And he fulfills his own potential. He doesn't see it as, okay, well, I'm done now. I've done my job. Even though all of us kids are a little bit older now, he's still every day, I think, is trying to fulfill his life and have a fulfilled life and be happy, which is really, really important. And for me, of course, is every day something for me to look up to.
Thank you, guys. Josh, what advice would you give to the kids that are currently facing the loss of a parent?
Man, there's a whole lot I would like to say. And shameless plug, come join our Hope at Home groups for teenagers, and you'll get to hear a lot more about what I would tell you guys. But in a brief summary of what I would tell you, I think the three girls hit it on the head with the regret. Do all you can to not regret your time that you have with your parent here. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you do, you will most likely regret something when they pass away, whether they pass away of cancer, or whether they pass away of old age, or whatever it is. There's always going to be regrets, I think, as kids with our parents. But I think the biggest thing that I can tell you is to enjoy the time that you have with them, and don't feel shame about having fun when they are sick. I mean, that's just, you're wasting your time feeling that way when you could have fun and make fun memories and enjoy your time with one another. Another thing I would suggest is to get to know your parents as kids and as college students and all of those things. I wish that I could go back and ask my parents or my mom that question of like her life story, her testimony, how she came to know the Lord, how she suffered and struggled in her life. Things that as kids we don't think about asking our parents because we're selfish and we're immature, and we think that when we're older we'll ask those questions, and we should focus more on us and our sports and our school and those sort of things, and we miss those opportunities. And unfortunately those opportunities are usually taken from us because our parents do die at an earlier age. So I would suggest figure out some questions that you want to ask your parents. Maybe it's what their friend group was like in high school, or what was the hardest thing that they went through, or I don't know, the list goes on. I wish that I could sit down and have a conversation with my mom and ask her some of those questions. So that's the biggest advice that I would give. Ask those questions, don't regret the conversations that you could have had, and then just love them well. Serve them, do things for them, because I promise you that they've spent their whole life caring for you, and now it's an opportunity for you to do the same for them. So do the dishes more, clean the house, and tell them that you love them, because regardless of whether they pass away again of cancer or of old age, there's kind of come a day where you can't tell them that you love them anymore. So do it all you can.
Thank you, Josh. And since you gave a shameless plug for Hope at Home groups, I'll also echo what you were just talking about. When you ask your parent those questions that you want to know, which I loved your examples, Josh, about like their childhood or their college time or their favorite job or whatever, just like throw your cell phone camera up and videotape it, or use a voice memo recording app and record their answers. Make it a little interview, and then you can play it for your kids someday, right? Or your grandkids, or other people, maybe your future spouse that might not get to meet your mom or your dad. That's just my shameless plug for legacy video / recordings. And maybe Haley will speak more to that, I don't know, but I'm gonna let her go next. What advice would you give, and this is to the kids actually, we'll talk about the kids, but what advice would you give to kids that are currently facing loss of a parent? Haley.
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything that Josh said. A lot of what he said is exactly what I would want to tell you right now. To the questions thing, you know, like I said earlier, there are a lot of questions that I still have for my mom that I didn't get a chance to ask. But some of the things that I did ask and some of the things I did know about her, I wrote them down in a little journal. And just recently I've gone back and I've looked at it and I'm like, wow, I completely forgot about this car ride we had to Freddie's, or, you know, something like that. And then it's like such a nice little memory, and I can kind of feel the love that, you know, just like a little reminder that she loved me. And, you know, that's just another idea too that you can do. But I know, you know, when my mom was sick, I often heard, when it happens, when your mom passes away, like it's going to hurt, but it'll hurt less and less over time. And I remember thinking, like, that can't be true. You know, that's not true. And it's not for some people. But I think for me personally, it did get a little easier over the time. I mean, obviously I miss my mom, and my heart, you know, aches when I think about her and not having her in my life right now. But I just want you guys to know that it can get easier, and it does get better. And you can't replace the love that you have for that parent. You can't replace the parent that you lose. But I think it's important for you guys to know that you should lean on the people that you have around you, whether it's one person, whether it's multiple people, you know, whether they know what you're going through and what you're experiencing, or they don't. It's really important to build some sort of community, family around you, so that way, you know, you can express your feelings, you can talk about your parent and keep their memory alive. Like, that's so important. I think Josh mentioned that too. Like, it's, you know, it's important to be able to talk about your parent so you can continue to love them, but also it's okay to, you know, move on a little bit in your life. You know, it's okay to still have fun. It's okay to go to your prom. You know, I went to my prom like a month after my mom died, and I remember I was like, I don't even know if I should be going, but it's okay. You know, she would want me to have gone, and I know your parents would want you to continue doing the things that you want to do in life. They don't want you to put your whole entire life on pause just because, you know, they unfortunately can't be there with you every step of the way. So I guess that would be my advice to you guys right now.
And if I could add something really quickly, a question that I think that a lot of us struggle with, maybe it's not a question, it's just the fact that, like, our parent won't be there at our wedding. And sometimes I don't think our parent thinks about that. They're struggling with a lot, and they're not thinking that far out. They just have to fight for tomorrow. And Inheritance of Hope does a great job of trying to get parents to think those questions. But you can help them out and ask those questions and get those recordings. So ask them, like, how their wedding day was, and then what they would like or envision for your wedding day, what they would say at your wedding, things like that. Because I know even today, if I were to think of an emotion that I really struggled with, is just like thinking about the future and my mom not being there. My future kids not having a grandma, my mom not being at my wedding, never meeting my future wife, never doing those things. And so trying to, like, think ahead and ask those questions to give yourself peace in the future.
Who else has some advice for kids currently facing the loss of a parent?
I do. Like Josh said, taking on kind of extra responsibilities is good to show your appreciation for your parents, but I do think that it can definitely be taken too far. You still want to like enjoy your youth, so don't feel like because your parent is sick, you have to be, an adult. Also, another thing that I would add is like Haley was saying, leaning on people that are around you. If you have siblings, I think it's really good to communicate with them and lean on them. And it can kind of be an opportunity for you to grow your relationships with your siblings, because although we can introduce you to people on retreats who are going through similar circumstances, you guys are going through the same experiences.
I really like what Rebecca said. And I think I would love to even say further, she said it's an opportunity to grow with your in your relationships with your siblings. I mean, I also think beyond it being an opportunity, you need to do that. Your immediate family, I forget who said it. I think it was Luke said before, a lot of people, when you lose someone, there's a lot of people there. And when it's a big date or anniversary or something, there's a lot of people there that are going to remember it with you. But at the end of the day, there's a very, very small group of people that are going to experience something exactly like what you're experiencing in relation to the person that you lost, if you do lose that person, or even in what terms of what you're going through with the illness currently. And that's your immediate family. So you have to be intentional with building those relationships and keeping those relationships healthy. You have that, it's there, what you guys are experiencing, the common threads are all there, but that doesn't mean that you guys, I know I take for granted, and I've certainly heard it from other people, take for granted my relationships with my sisters or my dad. But you, just like with everything else in life, you really have to nurture those relationships. You can't just let them go stale. And like I said, beyond, experiencing a tragedy, those are things that you're gonna need, really desperately need at various points in your life. And so you wanna make sure that those are there. The best way to do that is by making sure that you're taking care of them in the time that maybe it's not so necessary.
Yeah, I also really love what Becca said, but the first part specifically. So I want to just lean into that for a second. I agree with everything that everybody has said, and having a set of goals and everything like that for yourself is important. And we should be driven. We should have outlooks and ideas of what we want in our lives and all of that kind of thing. But I also agree that it can turn very quickly, especially with children who are struggling with a parent dying, that it becomes like you taking on the burden of your entire life as like a 15-year-old, and that's just not the way it's supposed to be. I would encourage you mostly to have a lot of grace for yourself and to remember that you're not supposed to be losing a parent. This isn't supposed to be this way, and everything that you're experiencing emotionally is allowed to be expressed. If you're angry, that's valid. You can express that. If you're grieving, that's also valid and you can express that. If you're happy, that's also valid and you can express that. It's not like, I don't want anybody, I did this, and which is why I know that it's so. What I don't want you to do is like take on the entire burden of your entire life all at once and try to react accordingly in a certain very specific way based on this set of things that you want to do. And if my life is going to look this way, I have to do this and all of that. I would just encourage you to experience everything as you experience it, and don't disallow yourself from experiencing something because it's not supposed to look that way at that point or whatever. Just express yourself authentically and have a lot of grace for yourself.
I would add on to that, centering around regret, I think is a big and important term sort of on this subject. And I think I would advise older, like teenagers. I was really young when mom was sick, and I think I'm thankful for that, because the time that I was spending with her, it was intentional, but some of my best experiences were just so like, um, I don't want to say unintentional, but just there was no like purpose. And I think that there's a lot of beauty in that. I mean, there's no way, like Josh mentioned, there's no way that you're gonna avoid having regrets. Like, it's gonna happen. So I would advise not to live in fear of those regrets necessarily. Like, you should have, especially for like older kids, you want to have an idea of like how you're going to be able to remember them and things like that. But also, I think it's important to have those sort of like non-scripted, just natural experiences, since you're sort of missing out on the natural relationship that that a lot of kids are having. And I would also caution you in how you remember your parent after they pass away. And I think the beauty of humanity is like in its imperfections, and that's kind of where faith comes in. I think it's important to be remembering all parts of you. Like I have a lot of stories that I sort of look back fondly of like me doing something stupid and mom getting like mad at me. And I think those like sort of imperfections in her parenting are pieces of her that I cherish. And those are easy to sort of forget, I think, especially in the first few years after, as some of my memories started fading a little bit more. I think all of my like negative memories were fading completely, and I had this sort of unrealistic image of who mom was. And I think that remembering all parts about her is important as well.
So good. I remember a few of your childish imperfections, Luke. Your mom handled it beautifully, but yes, not perfectly, for sure. Okay, that was really good, you guys. Thank you so much. There's so much wisdom. You guys are so wise for your young ages. I would love to hear if anyone has any advice for parents that are currently diagnosed with a terminal illness. So what advice would you give those people?
I think the main advice that I would give would be, again, to be intentional. Specifically, on our inheritance of hope retreats, one of our focuses is to make memories as a family. And I don't think that you should stop doing that when you go home. And I mean, like, you can even be making memories in small ways, like having a movie night that's like a surprise to your kids, or little things like that they may remember. And then aside from that, just putting your trust in God despite the difficult circumstances.
I think that it's good to, at least, I mean, not all kids are going to want to talk about their feelings with you, but I think it's good to try and open that communication with them, and ask them, what do they want? It's a hard question to ask, but like, what do you want maybe when you pass away? For example, I really wish that I would have told my mom that I wanted a letter from my graduation and a letter from my wedding. And I didn't get those, and that's kind of because I didn't want to talk about my feelings. And so I think if you try and open that communication with them and be honest about, what you can provide them. My mom did make me a legacy video, and if that's something that you haven't done, I really encourage you to do that. I want you guys to know it's not saying goodbye. It's nothing like that. It's, it's reminding your kids that you love them and that you're proud of them, even though you're not there to physically see it right now. And I think that that's something you should look into, not just for you to leave your own legacy, but also for your children when they grow up to see that legacy and still have those memories of you and be able to physically see you or hear the words, hear your thoughts, just things that they could have to, feel the love that you have for them.
Yeah, and I think a great way to open up that communication with your kids is to actually express it yourself. I know it's easy for a lot of parents to want to shield their kids from what they're experiencing, but the thing is, your kid is experiencing the same thing. If you're grieving about this loss, they are also, and shielding them from your tears is not ultimately helpful. And this is something that I would advise, that I wish my surviving parent had done differently. My dad is my favorite person on the planet, but he tried to shield me from his sadness, and I didn't really see him cry through the whole thing. And that communicated to me that I wasn't allowed to be upset about it and that I wasn't allowed to be sad. The happy parts were all there, like the joy, whatever, but all the bad stuff was kind of put into this corner, which was his very good desire to shield me from a very hard situation. But my mom still died, and I didn't end up knowing how to process it and how to feel all those emotions. So I think a good way which may be kind of scary and vulnerable, but I think a very good way, maybe the best way to open up that communication with your kids is to first demonstrate it and experience it yourself openly, which is something that a lot of people really have a hard time with, and maybe something that you have to learn. I know it took me a very long time to be comfortable crying in front of other people even, but that is a place where I would advise inviting the Lord into. We also like to separate the Lord from our emotions and Jesus from our emotions, but the only reason that I have any capability of expressing myself authentically in any semblance of that is because Jesus was, well, I didn't even invite him really. He kind of elbowed his way in there, but is because he became a part of my expression and part of my heart, and became a friend of mine in my tears. So I would advise you to learn how to express yourself that way, and then allow yourself to be vulnerable in front of your kids.
Yeah, I think just echoing that, it depends how old your kids are, I think, especially if they're younger. I know that the tendency is to shield them from those things, especially the sickness that you're dealing with. But tell them as much as you can, because they want to know. As much as it hurts to tell them, as much as it hurts to watch them receive that information, they want to know. They are interested, and they want to know how you're doing. And we as kids often push our parents away in those situations. And I think parents, you often push your kids away in those situations. And I think the advice that I would give you is don't allow your sickness to divide you and your kids and in your families. And then I've never been married, and so I can't really speak to how the relationship with your spouse works once you have a terminal illness, but be real with them, and don't make it your thing, but make it your thing, and something that you're going to fight together with. I think that I see a lot of parents and division in between them because of their sickness, and that shouldn't be the case. It should be something that should bring you closer together, something that you should fight together, and so join in that with one another, love one another through that, and rely on the Lord to give you the strength to do so.
Any other advice for parents, Spencer or Luke?
I did want to say really quick that it's the one, so we all lost our moms, which is I think a very specific dynamic and experience, but most of us, I think all of us, have served families that have sick dads too. And I do think that's a different dynamic and a different experience for a lot of people. So I just want to say for the dads, of course, that from what I've seen, I mean, I think that I've met some very, very strong dads, incredible dads for their families. And, you know, I think that the experience as a man that you have with something like this, with an illness like this, and how it might make you feel, and the realities of maybe losing that role that you have with your family, is something that's very difficult to deal with. And I think can be very unique to a dad at times. So I would say that take opportunities to do things that maybe you haven't tried before, and continue to do the things that you were doing before as the dad, as your children's father. Continue to do the things and teach them the things that you think you bring to their lives, that you think is valuable, and try some new things too. Maybe things that before you didn't ever think would be something that you would do with your kids. Just give it a shot. I know my dad would never have gone on an Inheritance of Hope retreat if he was the one who was sick. And, you know, which would have been a loss for us. I think there are other things though that my dad, you know, would have taught me and still does teach me every day. And if I had lost him, I would have lost different things than what I lost with my mom. So like I said, I just wanted to acknowledge that. I know it's a different experience and there's different dynamics that come along with that.
Yeah, just to add to that really quick, as a man, if you are sick and you are a father, it doesn't make you any less of a father. It doesn't make you any less of a man to be sick, to not be able to provide in some of the ways that I know you want to. That's just innately, that's who we are as men, is we want to provide, we want to work hard, we want to do those things. And it doesn't make you any less of that because you are sick. So I just want to encourage you with that. Yeah.
Okay, we have just about 5 to 10 minutes left here, and I have one final question I'd love for everyone who wants to be able to answer this. Has there been anything good that has come out of this?
For me, I found a lot of appreciation in my family and my family dynamic, and appreciation for my mom and my dad. It really brought my relationship with my dad a lot closer than I think it would have been if my mom hadn't gotten sick. We got to know each other a lot better, and I love that so much. I feel I'm extremely close to my dad, and I'm very thankful that he's been my rock. But I think that, you know, with my mom being sick and with my mom passing away, I really appreciate her more as a person and how amazing she actually was. And I don't think I don't think that I would have realized that had she not been sick, which is unfortunate. Or maybe I would have gotten there eventually as I got a lot older. But I think I realized that a lot sooner, and I was able to start building relationships with my family a lot sooner due to the fact that I had to face loss in my life. So.
I'm going to try to answer this really quickly. I could speak on this for hours, but gosh, there's been so much good that has come out of my mom's diagnosis, her passing away. The list, it just way outnumbers. The blessings way outnumber the suffering. But I think the number one thing that I gained from it was true life. And that is life with Christ. I want to read 2 verses to you guys, one of them being Romans 5:3-5. It says, "But we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been gifted to us." And then the other verse that I want to read is Philippians 3, verses 7-10 or 7-11. It says, "But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. And I would not know Christ the way I do today if my mom had not passed away. It says in James that we are to count it all joy when we face trials of many kinds. And I didn't know what that meant until I lost my mom. My mom was my rock. She was the one I could always rely on. She was at every single sporting event. She was at everything that I needed her for. She was there. And I really think that I made my mom my God, and someone that I knew would be there for me. And when she passed away, there was a hole so big that only Jesus could fill. And in a way that I cannot take credit for in any way, he came into my life, and he made his home in me, and he gave me joy, and he gave me peace, and he has just gifted me with so much. Inheritance of Hope being one of them. If my mom hadn't had cancer, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't live in Ohio. I wouldn't know my new family. I wouldn't know most of the people that I communicate with on a day-to-day basis. And that's all because my mom had cancer and she passed away. And not that those things aren't hard. Not that I don't miss my mom. But there's just been so much good that has come out of it. So if I just could encourage you guys with anything, is that suffering is a blessing when you learn to see it that way. And the only way that you're able to see it that way is if you allow the Lord to show you the blessings that he has given you, and all of the ways that he has changed your life through it.
So good, Josh. Thanks. We have a few more minutes for the rest of you. Has anything good come out of this?
I would echo Josh in that I could sit here all day and could write a book about how much good has come out of it. I mean, it's so much more than the negatives. It's one of the most positive impacts on my life, despite how painful it is. And I hope that many of you find that as well. And I think that for me, this was sort of the first step. I think emotionally, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am now without this. Almost all of the relationships I've had are sort of rooted in this experience that I've had that's sort of built me. I mean, in faith, definitely, but since it's sort of like the foundation of like your life is your childhood, and this is something that we're experiencing, and like that foundation, it's shaping who you're going to be and who you are. And so I think your outlook on it is very important in what you're going to be taking away from it, because it's easy to take away the negatives, but if you sort of focus on what you have instead of what's being taken away from you, and what more you're getting, like if you're watching this video, then there's so many tools that are now available to you that weren't before in this group of people. And I think that is alone is so, and I think my mom would certainly agree that that's so much more important than her life is, as important as her life was to me and everyone here, really. I think she would agree that just this one video session is much more valuable than her life alone. And on a bigger scale, this whole operation is something that every day brings me joy and fills me up in a way that mom really couldn't. And she, even though this was sort of her and my dad's starting, I think that it's grown so far from there in such a positive way. And to be able to see that is something that's just so valuable. to me. And I think my mom would be the first one in line to agree with that.
We're gonna let Luke have the last word? Wow. I think it's actually a great last word because he summed it up well. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
I'll say really quick. First of all, it's fun for me to sit here and watch with all three Milligans on here because I know all three of you, but it's funny. It's just me having two siblings too, watching you three doing this all together is awesome. Obviously, so I am on staff with Inheritance of Hope. Everybody on here is really heavily involved with Inheritance of Hope. And what's crazy for me is I was thinking about this while Josh and Luke were talking was that I've never met anyone involved with Inheritance of Hope that is not one of the more selfless people and more kind and hope-filled people, hope-filled kids, hope-filled people that I've ever met. And that could be that's just who is drawn to Inheritance of Hope, and I think that's true. But I also think a big reality of that is the reality of dealing with something like a terminal illness and that touching you personally. I think it refines you in a really special way. I think a bigger reason why the people who are involved with Inheritance of Hope are the way that they are is because they have been touched by this really, really hard thing, and it has made them to be who they are. So to me, that's a huge positive because it's not just me, it's not just the people on this call, I think everybody that is touched by this is refined by it in some way.
So true. You guys are such a tremendous gift. Amazing. I appreciate your time and all of your words. And I know that everyone watching does too. I know you guys are going to read these chats and be encouraged by how much you've blessed people. So thank you for taking the time to share your hearts and be vulnerable. And I thank God for each of you. I pray for you daily, each of you. And I thank God for your moms and their lives and legacies and for your dads as well. And so thank you guys. I think everyone watching this wants to thank you. So I'm going to just say it for them. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you guys. Bye.